Ron Control, part two. Hello everyone, it is me, Pui, and we are back for How to Ron, part 2. Before I begin, I think it's a very important question that needs answering. Why is this deck called Ron Control? It's a question I get very often, and the answer is so very simple. This deck was invented by a user named Ron5, and that's what he called it. There's really nothing else to it. That's as simple as that. If you want to see the original Ron 5 video, it is up, I believe, still on the E3 Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So I'll go ahead and link that just for your education, for your information. But absolutely the most based duelist of all times, and definitely not just James Ark reviewing his own replay. In any case, we're going to talk about another influential Ron Control aficionado today by the name of Alderso. If you've played any ladder at all, or you were around when the Europeans were around, aka Enraged Panda, EP, then this name probably has you shitting your pants. But this is his style of Ron Control. The man was known for playing these stally, desert sunlight nonsense decks to their maximum potential. This is Mr. Standby Phase Sunlight, your M-Jar. You go -1, I go +4. And this is what I learned from watching him play Ron Control and talking with him. So big shouts to him as always. What a great guy. Now, when looking at Alderso's deck, what we learn best from this is how to understand what our opponent is doing and how it affects our game plan as the Ron Control player. Because in this deck, we don't exactly have the tools to win the game on the spot during a Rombo, and for him, that wasn't the point. So, personally, I'll start by saying this deck I don't think treads much water in comparison to some other decks that now exist for GOAT format. Chaos Turbo pretty easily takes this apart these days, I'd say. Warriors, Dust Shoe, all this stuff is going to give it a field day. But the Scapegoats do a lot for us in lieu of those OTK cards. And again, very good teaching moment. First thing to know is that Alderso was not always killing the turn he was doing a Rombo, and he also was not always doing a Rombo the turn that he could do one. This deck was very much about being patient. It won a lot more by deck outs or by using slump and then waiting another couple of turns. This was not much of an OTK deck most of the time, and if it was doing it pretty late game. The plan was to find the right conditions by which doing the Ronbo will completely cripple the opponent and going from there. And sometimes that meant a kill. Sometimes it meant having a deck out on deck, but other times it meant just kind of having all the back row we needed and knowing that their tools that they still had in their deck wouldn't do the job. So when doing a Rombo, there's some things you have to take into account. Thing number 1, Heavy Storm. Is Heavy Storm gone yet? Has it been used yet? Do you need to worry about it anymore? If the answer is yes, then you need to be a lot more careful with your Ronbo. If you can't see Heavy Storm is already gone, then you cannot guarantee your survival for the next turn whatsoever. And if you can't guarantee your survival for the next turn, it's going to be very bad to try to play through a Heavy Storm, even with Scapegoats, because you've given them a bunch of cards. It's very likely they'll be able to kill you. Thing number 2, are BLS and Ring gone? How many Sorks are gone? Especially for Chaos Turbo, these are your opponent's abilities to deal big amounts of damage. So if Heavy Storm, Ring, BLS, Sork, so these cards are all gone, it's very unlikely that their deck even has cards to be able to kill you anymore. So keep that in mind. It's especially important to think about this in the context of card destruction. Now, there's an inverse probability that occurs with card destruction, most explainable by the Monty Hall problem. When you activate a card destruction and your opponent has more cards in deck than they have in hand, which is most of the time, but if they still have the majority of their cards in their deck and it's not going to kill them, then it's more likely you're going to draw them into the cards that they don't have already than that they already have the scary cards and you're getting rid of them, right? Because you have a lower probability of drawing BLS at the start of the game than it still being in your deck. And so now you're getting rid of those cards and giving them new cards from the smaller sample size. So it's much more likely you just handed them Storm and BLS. If you have info telling you that Storm and BLS are in their hand, then obviously you're safe to go ahead and do that. It's probably beneficial. If the Cyberjar reveals BLS and Rings, card destruction those things the fuck away. Get them out of there, and you will be doing much better off. But if you haven't seen them yet, you're putting yourself in danger. The next thing that Alderso really liked to pay attention to was whether or not they've already activated Thunder Dragon. If they still have Thunder Dragon in deck, you're probably hurting them by doing any sort of Ron-related, card destruction, jar-related stuff, because they're going to be drawing into a bunch of dead Thunder Dragons, and you're not, which is really nice. So if they get a Thunder Dragon off of a jar and you have a chance to do a card destruction, you're more likely to hit them into more Thunder Dragons, which is kind of dead. So that was something definitely worth thinking about. You also want to think about how much defense you can currently put up. And this is, of course, assuming that Heavy Storm's been gotten rid of. If you take a look at a Ron control deck, you have 3 Book of Moons, you got a Ring of Destruction, and then you got some Scapegoats maybe. That's it. That's your defense. And this all goes for whether or not you're playing the Turbo or Control variant. You have to ask yourself, what can I do with the monsters on my field? A couple of Book of Moons and a Ring of Destruction, right? Like, is that going to save me? Is that going to let me play to the next turn? And if it does, am I equipped to do a second part of a Rombo to end the game? Can I kill them? Can I deck them? Can I slump them? Is the next turn's follow-up, is getting my normal summon back going to do what I need to do to end out the game? It's very important to keep that all in mind. And then the next part of this, obviously, in addition to all of those couples of considerations, is the siding. So for this particular deck, it can side into Decree Control, and this is something that we talked about only a little bit in the last video, but we can definitely talk about it more now. In this particular build, for example, he's got a Scapegoat at his disposal along with the 3 Decree, and he has Zambira for Warrior, he has Spirit Reaper. He played a Just Koala for Burn. It was just like another way for him to win in certain matchups where he thought that was beneficial, and he also played 2 Shallow Graves, so he could go much harder on the Rombos if he wanted to. This is my build of the deck, and you'll see it looks a little different. So I'm also playing Zambira for Warrior. I'm also playing Scapegoat. I'm playing Creature Swap. I really like this card. I think it has a good, Warrior matchup, and I think it also serves as another Book of Taiyu in a pinch, which is great. I've got the Decrees. I've also got the Shallow Graves. The deck is not that much different, but I did end up replacing a Night Assailant for a Sook, which makes our Goat and meta just a little better. And I'm also only playing 2 Book of Moon. I don't know if that's advisable or not, but this deck, can pretty easily become a Chaos control deck, and is a nice, more stable and slow playing sort of thing than playing Ron control. A lot less flimsy, I'd say, can hold up a lot better defense, at least a little bit better, especially with the tomatoes. The swap is quite good. But all in all, I think it's most important to consider, what does my opponent still have in their deck? And what do I still have in my deck? When I do this Rombo, what is more likely to happen? Is it time to card destruction? Am I going to be getting rid of their good cards, or am I going to be more likely to be giving them good cards? Because if I can't kill them this turn, or slump them this turn, or deck them this turn, then all I've got is some Book of Moons, a Scapegoat, and a Ring. Can those cards survive me to the next combo? These are the questions we need to be asking. And with that, that's the second lesson. We'll come back soon after a couple videos. We'll do part 3. I will go through some replays, and we'll see how the deck goes. But until then, I hope you have a lovely day. Ron.